Hello and welcome. Hopefully 30 seconds from now somebody will be able to tell me that I'm live, because there is a slight delay, but I'm going to trust YouTube and say hello to each and every one of you in the chat. Wow, there's a lot of chat already. I'm going to catch up on that very, very soon. But let's get straight into it. So I need to press some buttons and I will be with you. Excellent. Now I do believe you're seeing what you're supposed to be seeing. But if not, let me know. I have Mike manning the chat. So, blend modes this week. Right, first of all, just in case there's anybody who doesn't know who I am, because people have said that. I'm Elaine Giles, and I've used photo editing software for a long, long time. In fact, in this session, I'm going to share with you my very first one. So before that, we are broadcasting in 1080p. Put it in the chat. What has YouTube done to you? I had a video at 360 yesterday and I thought that looks a bit fuzzy. So just make sure that you are in the highest definition that you want to watch in and we can get going. While you're down there having a look at that, if you enjoy the session, give us a thumbs up. It really makes a difference with YouTube. So, blend modes. This is the plan for today. The plan for today is a very brief history. Don't worry, it's not an archaeological dig. It's a very brief history. Then a very brief theory. You do need to understand a couple of concepts, but we're going to focus mainly on lots of practical examples of where blend modes will make your life a whole lot easier. So that's the plan. Now, you tell me in the chat which was the first photo editing software you used. And if you're watching a replay, put it in the chat. Not the chat, the comments. Put it in the comments. My first photo editing application was Deluxe Paint. That was on my Commodore Amiga in 1988. Looking back, it was actually amazing. But I remember at the time opening it up and having a look and thinking, I think it was because I'd had Microsoft Paint in my mind, which I'm not counting as an image editing application. But Deluxe Paint was my very, very first. And it's always stuck with me, that Egyptian image that was on the front of it. And I loved it. But a few years later, I moved to the PC. And as soon as I moved to the PC, I got this version of Photoshop. Photoshop 2.5. In fact, I even think it was a light version. But the interface, oh my, I even remember that. I remember that image. It was one of the sample images. So that was, as you see, the light edition. LE was Photoshop Lite. And I didn't pay for it. It was free. Photoshop Lite was free. But a couple of years after that, 1994, the next version of Photoshop arrived. Photoshop 3. And that was the first version of Photoshop to have blend modes in it. Right there, where they still are today, in the layers panel. I got those images and had an absolute ball reading about the history of Photoshop on this site, which is techrev.me. So if you would like to go back and have a look at the history of image editors, I mean, even just the icons. And every time they bring a new icon out for Photoshop, it's like, this is it, this is fabulous. And then they change it. I mean, look at version 8 and version 9. They recoloured the feather and flipped it round. I enjoyed that site. So if you would like to go and have a look at the history of all of this, do check out techrev.me. I had a ball. Now, that's the history of it in Photoshop, but it's from Photoshop that we've reached the point we are today. Affinity Photo, which launched in July 2015, and it launched with blend modes. These blend modes are what is in it today, so March 2021. It did not launch with all of these. The very latest one was only added a few weeks ago, and that was the divide blend mode that we've already looked at a couple of times. But that's what is in there right now. The groupings, everywhere you look, you will see lots of information about blend modes, but it will all be to do with Photoshop. And what Affinity have done is replicate the groupings and the blend modes. So the normal at the top, and then dark and light and contrast, comparative and colour. Nowhere have I seen any title or proper name for the extra ones that Affinity has that are either not in the same place or they are extra to Photoshop. So we've called them the Affinity Extras. I am not intending to take you on a scientific tour of each and every one. You'd be asleep in 5 minutes. But it is probably worth looking at the science generally behind blend modes, just so you've got an idea of what's going on. That will help you in the practical application of them. So there's 32 of them to have a look at. But this is something that you can consider to be a transferable skill, because every single thing that you learn about blend modes in Affinity Photo also applies to Affinity Designer and Affinity Publisher. They are exactly the same. They are implemented in exactly the same way. More than that, if you do find yourself, for whatever reason, honestly it's happened to me, all of a sudden you need to use Photoshop or Pixelmator or Acorn or anything else, the principles are again exactly the same. So anything you learn about blend modes, transferable skill. But blend modes, they are equations, mathematical formula. But it's not as hideous as it sounds, honestly. Right, concepts that you need to know. You need, for a blend mode to work, you need at least 2 layers. In any image editing application, obviously we're focusing on Affinity Photo. The techniques we're going to refer to here as we look at them, in terms of you need a minimum of 2 layers, is you're going to have 1, the base layer, and 2, the blend layer. And it's the pixels on each of those layers that we're going to then talk about. You can use more than 2 layers with blend modes, but 2 is the bare minimum, because a blend mode is an interaction between 2 pixels on 2 or more layers. I can show you how simple the maths can be for a specific blend mode. It can get very complicated, but I'm going to show you that in a second. But just to make sure we know exactly what we're talking about, when we start talking about the maths, the numbers, we're going to have 2 numbers. But where do they come from? And they're coming from the base layer, 1 from the base layer, 1 from the blend layer. But precisely, it's going to be a location of a single pixel on the base layer and the same single pixel in terms of in the same location on the blend layer. And then the formula, the blend mode, the maths of it all operates on those 2 values. 1 value from the base layer, 1 value from the blend layer, but we're talking about the value of an individual pixel, 1 from each layer. So let's take a really simple example. It's a good job I can't see the chat right now, but I'm sure Mike will let me know if anybody doesn't get this live. But I'm expecting grand things with this. This is the first formula. If you have a pixel on the base layer and you have a pixel on the blend layer, and the value of each of those pixels is 50, and you use the add, clue is in the name, blend mode, what's the answer? Now, as I say, on the live stream, there's a lag of about 30 to 40 seconds. So rather than me sit here, I'm going to assume that everybody is going to be able to add, clue is in the name, the value of 50 and 50 and get the fact that that would be 100. And that is it. That's as complicated as that needs to get. The principle of that, the interaction of the pixel from the base layer and the pixel in the same location in the blend layer, that's it. That's the concept of blend modes. That's the maths of one of them. They can get much more complicated than that, but why do we need to worry about the actual maths? As long as you've got the principle of what's happening, we can move on. So, has anybody got that correct? Oh, well done, Jonathan. Well done. Right, we're going to take a look at the overlay blend mode. Obviously, there's quite a few in there, and I will be going through quite a few of them and showing you when they're going to be most helpful to you. But just as a matter of principle, keep in mind the interaction of these 2 pixels that are in the same location on 2 different layers while we look at overlay. Overlay is one of the most useful blend modes. So let's imagine we've got this on 1 layer. and I'll be able to show you this live very shortly. We've got solid blocks of colour. We have the black block, the 50% grey block, and the white block, and they are literally just 3 blocks put on a layer. That is going to be the blend layer. Underneath it, we've got that image, and that is our base layer. So if I make the blend layer, the one with the blocks on it, if I make that overlay, this is what happens. Where the black was, the black pixels get darker, so you get more contrast. The image looks much punchier than it did without it. 50% grey, little bit mushy, basically ignored. And the white one, more of a nuclear winter. Okay, so that's what's happening with that blend mode. It is altering the pixels that we see. So the result that we see is now based on the interaction between the pixel, each individual pixel on the base layer, and how it is interacting with that same pixel on the blend layer. Right, let's try that with colour. So same image below, but this above it. This is the blend layer, and this is the base layer. And if we make that overlay again, that's what it looks like. It's an interaction of each and every pixel from the blend layer and the base layer, and it gives us a completely different look. That one is overlay. Not bad if you wanted to add colour to it. If you wanted to say like the rainbow colours of Christmas, not bad, not bad. This is another blend mode. And I wouldn't particularly expect you to instantly say, well, obviously that's X. But let's have a look at it. Is that better or worse than the last one? Whatever that one is. And if you want to have a guess what it is, do please put that in the chat. Let's have a look at it. That one's got white. It's whiter in the branches, but I don't think the trunks of the trees look particularly realistic. Whereas in that one, there's a little bit more contrast in it, and it does look a bit more realistic in terms of the trees. Not particularly the colours, but in terms of the trees. Has anybody hazarded a guess, Mike? No. Okay. Well, this one is the colour blend mode. So if you have an image like that one was virtually black and white, and you want to add some colour to it, and I'm not necessarily saying a rainbow, but maybe you want to make an image a sepia colour, then you have the colour blend mode to do that. And again, although the result is different, the result's different because it's a different blend mode, but how it is applying is exactly the same. It's finding that location of the pixel on the base layer, finding the same pixel on the blend layer, and performing some magic with it and giving you the result. And that is the result of the colour blend mode. Obviously, there are some in there, and let me know in the chat, have you done this? Have you gone on a scenic tour of the blend modes and just gone up and down and thought, no, oh, that one's not bad? Have you done that? Because same images, different blend mode, and we get that. Now, that looks shockingly useless, doesn't it? Shockingly useless. But that's a blend mode that is incredibly useful. Not particularly in terms of applying to an image, as you can see, but it's a very useful blend mode. And I will be showing you a couple of demonstrations with that. That is the difference blend mode, the difference between the two. And then we've got that one, which we've actually demonstrated twice before, but that was in an after hours session. So it's there for you to go and see. So knowing that we've demonstrated that one, maybe if you've seen it, you can put in the chat what that one is. That might be just the effect you're looking for. When we demonstrated it, it wasn't that kind of image. But that is the very latest blend mode. That's the divide blend mode. Same two images, the bench and the colours, but a very different effect. Right, so that's what you can do with them, but we need to do more practical things, don't we? So let's head off and actually do that. So I think I've got Affinity Photo open. Might have, might not. Doesn't look like I did. So it's having a think about it. There we go. Right. Don't actually need half this interface at the moment, but we'll stick with it. Right, what I'm going to do is open up, if I can find my files, where have my files gone? I'm going to open up the image that I took those ones from. So making sure that's the one, I think it is. Right, I'm going to open this image up, and this is where I took those images that appeared in the presentation in here. I must have another version of this. I must do. Oh, I have, it's there. A proper Affinity Photo version. There we go. The other one was a Photoshop version. Right, there's the Affinity Photo version. Right, what I've got here is the background of that image. And this is the layer with the grey, black and white on it. So I did that with it, and then I changed the blend mode to get the result that I needed to save out to put in my presentation. So this is the base layer. In fact, let's put that in, just in case you're unsure. That's the base layer. And this one's going to be the first blend mode layer. So the first blend layer. So I'm going to open them up from where they are in here. And we used overlay. So if we go down to overlay, that's exactly the effect that we had. So it's an interaction between the black pixels and all the other pixels on the left, the 50% grey in the middle and the white. And the results that you will get with these blend modes are incredibly different. So let's change the blend mode. If I go to the darken blend mode, I can't see anything on the left. And that's because in these groups of blend modes that you have normal at the top for a start. So normal, there isn't any interaction between the two layers. You can fake an interaction between the layers, but it isn't actually a true interaction in terms of, oh, I'm taking this value and multiplying it by this value. I'm taking this value and adding it to that value. It's not that kind of interaction. But what you can do is change the opacity of the layer above. And that will make it look like there's some interaction between the layers. But actually, all that's happening is you are reducing the opacity of what is about to be the blend mode, the layer above the base layer. That's it. That's all you're doing with it. But don't discount opacity for being useful. Because if you do apply a blend mode, so let's just say darken, you can also apply an opacity and get a different result from it. So opacity is your friend, but alone it's not a blend mode. So back to our groups. So we had normal at the top, which is the normal group, and then everything is delineated with a separator. The darken blend mode, the group name is also darken. So everything in there, those 5 blend modes, will make things darker. So for instance, this that we have in the background is quite nice, but it's a little bit wishy-washy. There's not much in the way of contrast in it. Maybe you could say it's even overexposed. Hold that thought. So what we could do with that is when we go up here and we've got darken, you could also multiply. Now, multiply with this layer isn't making that much difference. Not really. So we've got darken, we've got multiply. Multiply is not changing the impact of the black pixels or the white pixels. It's operating on the 50% grey in the middle. So it's ignoring the black and the white. As you go through the options, that one is giving you much more contrast in the middle. But again, the interaction with the black and the white, not actually useful. Keep going. Probably on that one, the middle one maybe, but it's a bit dark. And then there's darker colour. Now, basically I think of these as being more impactful as you go down the list. So darker colour does exactly what darken does. It just does more of it. Now, that's when we've used here this black, grey, white layer. I'm just for the sake of completeness going to go through the other layers that we've got here. So this one has 4 blocks of colour on it. And if I change the blend mode there to overlay, that's what we had in the presentation, but I had it in stripes. So each one with overlay is impacting it. The bench is much darker in the lower right, and you've got the colours overlaying on all the other blocks. And then we've got the last one, which is that which has all of them in it. So if we change the blend mode of that to overlay, you can see the impact that that actually has on it. Now, That's when you've got a layer that is either, I mean, these are demonstration layers. They are full solid blocks of colour. But much more likely with this one that I would like to make the whole image darker, more impactful, have more contrast with it. And in that case, I'm not going to fiddle around by putting a blend layer on it that is full of colour. I'm going to want to say to it, where it's darker in there, make it darker. So for that, I'm going to duplicate that layer. So at the moment, it's identical. Those two layers are the same. But that one is not going to be the base layer. That one is going to be the blend layer. So I go to my blend mode, and darken is an option, but it doesn't do anything. Now, you've seen what darken does. It makes things darker. So why is it not making anything happen here? And the answer is the pixel, each individual pixel on the base layer and each individual pixel on the blend layer are identical. So what do you want it to do? What can it do? It's going to show you the darkest pixel, but they're both the same. That's why it doesn't make any change at all. But multiply, as the name implies, should have an impact. It's going to take the value of the pixel from the base layer, same pixel from the blend layer, and multiply them together. Multiply, darken, colour burn, linear burn, darker burn, always going to end up giving you a darker image. So if you apply multiply, that's much punchier. You've now got a lot of contrast. And you've done it with just a copy of the pixels on the layer below by duplicating it and then changing the blend mode. So instead of playing around and thinking, oh, darken and, in fact, not darken, adjusting the brightness and the contrast and everything else, this is a very quick way of fixing an image. So when you are pressed for time, as I am always pressed for time, you need the fastest way to do something. And this is the fastest way to do that. Now, the blend modes that are in the darken group, darken, multiply, colour burn, linear burn, darker burn, darker colour, are the opposites of some of the others. So, multiply is the opposite to screen. And when you apply screen, it's like, whoa, that is a nuclear winter. That's having the complete opposite effect. Have we had people telling us that they've done the scenic tour of the blend modes list?
Renee says been there, done that.
Right, okay. I know you can't hear Mike very well. I've turned him off. Turn the microphone off. But he says yes. Right, okay. So that's it at its absolute essence. Its absolute simplest. But what does that mean for you when you come to work with images? So let's start having a look at that. So we'll get rid of this image. Don't need that one. And we'll start having a look at some other images and what you can do with them. So one of the very basic things you can do is exposure correction. And I have an overexposed image here. I've actually called it overexposed Mike, which probably wasn't the best thing to call it. This was taken many moons ago. Look at that. You've got your Manchester Arndale t-shirt on, Mike. That was when the Apple Store opened in Manchester Arndale, probably about 2006, 2007. Oh, what a day. But it is very overexposed. Now, I had to do that with it because I had two images. I took two photos. This was the first one. It was a lovely, bright, sunshiny day. Why is that not fitting on the screen? Can we make this smaller? I do believe we can. There we go. That was because it was a lovely, bright day. And as you can see, Mike's shielding his eyes from the sun, and now we can't see his eyes at all. And I could see that because it was my Canon 30D, I think it was. So I took another one, and that's what we're looking at now. And on that one, I used the flash. And that's a little bit too overexposed, just on Mike's face and arm and hand. The rest of it looks all right, but that bit doesn't look quite so good. So I could start dodging and burning and generally playing around, or I could do it the easier way. So what I ended up with, and this was many moons ago, was that. And I was quite happy with that. How did we do that? Well, in here, I've got multiple blends, multiple layers, multiple copies of the image below. and I have applied different blend modes to them and then edited them. So first thing I need to do to recreate that is duplicate the layer, Command and J, or Control and J if you're on a PC. Right, at the moment, no interaction between them. I could change the opacity, but that's going to make absolutely no difference whatsoever because the two layers are identical. So this layer needs to be, bearing in mind that is the blend layer, so we'll actually put it in that that's the blend layer. That needs to have a different blend mode applied to it. You're probably screaming out, which one? Right, it's got to make it darker, so it's going to be one of the darkened ones. But again, if I apply darken, does nothing. The pixels are the same, therefore it has no effect whatsoever. If you're thinking to yourself, that's ridiculous, why would you need the blend mode? Why would the blend mode ever be there if it doesn't impact it? And at times it does. So if we put a new fill layer on our image and we then go find a colour, so let's go find a colour. I think there's a brown one in here. There's a brown image on it, brown pixels on it. If we change that blend mode to darken, it does have an impact. So the only reason it's not having an impact, it's not a good impact, but it's an impact. The only reason it's having no impact with the blend layer that we've got is because the pixels are identical. Now with that one, you probably take the opacity down and say, oh, look, it's 1973. So that's the kind of thing that you could do with a blend mode, a darken blend mode, but you probably need to change the opacity with it. But that's by the by. We need to work on this one, and darken isn't doing it. But multiply will make everything darker. Now, Mike looks better in the face, but the rest of it, a little bit too much. So obviously what we need to do is apply that blend layer, but only where we want to have it applied. And the easiest way to do that is to put a mask on it. Now, I think I was playing around with brushes. Oh, I was. So I'm going to need the basic brushes here, or it'll get very silly. So I'm going for something like that, which is, I am hoping, a very soft brush. So I need my brush tool. So B for my brush tool. And I'm checking at the top that my opacity is 100%, flow is 100%. I actually want that at 0% hardness because I want it quite soft. Otherwise, you're going to see the difference. So let me show you what happens. Why is that not moving? There we go. I'm trying to make it bigger. If that was set to 100% hardness and I started working in here and thinking, right, well, I want this brighter, we get a really harsh edge on it. That is not a good look. So that's why we take the hardness all the way down in this circumstance. And now when I brush it on, you get a much gentler edge. It isn't obvious that you're actually changing things at the moment. And I'm brushing over and I'm hiding the blend layer where I don't want it. So we'll have the sky back to lighter as well, like that. And just go around Mike a bit. Okay, that's not bad at all. So I think the eyes and the face, not bad. But the hand's still a little bit bright because when the image was taken, the hand was closer to the camera. So it's had more of the flash on it. I'm going to leave that blend mode layer exactly where it is. Go back to the original one and Command and J again to duplicate it. Change that to darken. No, to multiply. Again, I'm going to need a mask on it. Now, because this is nearer to the camera, for me, I'm going to take that and put it at the top. This is also a blend layer. So I'm going to put that there so we know what we're looking at. But this is to lighten the hand. Darken the hand, rather, and lighten the rest of it. So what I need to do is to put another mask on that layer. And again, I need to take all of this out because we don't want it there. And I'm also going to go over the face as well. And just leave the impact of that on the hand. And that means we should get some, let's take that there, of the detail back in the hand. Now, to show you what we've actually done there, I turn off the blend mode that sorted the face out, and I turn off the background, we're left with just the hand, and you can see I've missed bits. So this is a good way to make sure that you've not missed bits. So I don't want that there, and I'm going to get quite close to Mike here. So just the hand is the thing there. Now I can see some transparency through the hand. So what I'm going to do is change the brush to a much harder brush, so about 60. Make the brush smaller, so I'm using the square bracket keys for that. Only this time, instead of doing that which is going to wipe it out completely, we need to go back and look at what we've got with the colour. And if in here, let's put that as white, now it will bring it back. So I'm making it smaller so I can draw over the hand and make sure that we've got all of the hand and that none of it is transparent, and that will give us a much better finish to it. Possibly got a little bit too much there, not sure, maybe a bit. In which case, I'll use the X key, which switches us from black to white at the top. And if I were to go over that bit there, it would take it out of it like that. But the problem I've got with that is, because the brush was so hard, I could end up with a hard edge on that. So I would probably not do that. I would probably take this back to 100, so it's down to 0, a hardness of 0, and start to take it out there like that. So it gives me much more control. Don't want all of this. But we'll leave the hand, and we can probably get rid of some of this as well, because it is just the hand that we want. Right, we've got detail back in the hand. And I'm taking away the ghosting that I'm seeing. And now when we put, let's get back to full screen so we can see it. Let's put the face in. That's where we've got that applied to the face. Again, this is a good point to say to yourself, well, I don't need this bit down here. And you can start taking that away. So make sure we're on the right one, and that we've got white, and that we're on the mask layer. Are you going to work there? What are you doing? I think that's working. Just a minute. That's bringing back detail, isn't it? And I don't want it to bring back detail. Come on, there we go. So let's get rid of that so it's not too much. We're not affecting more than we want to. So you can see at the top, I've missed bits at the top, and I'm going to take that out of it. And now when you turn the background layer back on, your base layer, perfect. So let's do a before and an after. Grab the two of them. And when you have a multiple selection in the layers, you can use the tick and it will turn them both on or off. So there's the before, there's the after. That is a little bit harsh on the edges here for me, but it'll do for a demo. I'd spend a little bit longer with it. Right, do we have any questions about that? We've got 2 questions, and is it all about this?
Yeah.
Right. Let's have that then. Well, if you just read it out to me, I'll answer it, or tell me where it is.
What exactly would be the advantage over this, over the dodge and burn function?
Right, okay. If you mean dodge and burn as dodge and burn is, then dodge and burn is destructive. There are ways to make dodge and burn not destructive, but this remains editable, a lot easier than dodge and burn. But there are many, many techniques and they achieve exactly the same results. So some people, it's like the pen tool. You either love or loathe the pen tool. So people, if you love the pen tool, use the pen tool for jobs. Other people will think, no, I'm going to make shapes and I'll edit it later. They'll do it a completely different way, but you both end up with the same shape. So if you're happy with the dodge and burn, then you can use the dodge and burn. This, to me, enables me to go back and edit it later without thinking, what did I do in the dodge and burn? And dodge and burn, as I say, is destructive unless you use one of the non-destructive methods. So that's really the only reason. Anything, a lot of the things that I'll show you today, I'll try and remember to say there is an alternative way to do this and at least tell you what the alternative way is. But yeah, it makes it easier as far as I'm concerned to go back and edit it again. So like I've just said, that's not bad, but I think it's a little bit harsh here where the t-shirt seems to change colour. So as I would take some of this out, I'd be a little bit more careful with it. But I could go in and do that later because everything's non-destructively edited. Do we have the other question?
Yeah. Do I understand it right that to apply a blend option, I need to duplicate the original layer to apply the blend mode upon?
Yes, if what you want to do is what we've done here. Sometimes the blend layer will be a solid wall of colour. Sometimes it'll be something completely different, but you do need to have those two layers to do it on. Now, having said that, there are some very clever shortcuts where you have the blend layer, which is where you have the original layer, the base layer at the background, and instead of duplicating it, you can add like an empty layer and then work magic with it. That I will show that down the line, but there are sometimes it's better to do things a different way than actually use the blend mode. Okay? So hopefully that answers that question. Right. Okay, so let's move on from the basic one with Mike. Let's close Mike down. Now, this is a very good example of that. So I've gone in there and I've done all that work to recover that image. Now, that was a selectively recovered image. I have two other images here. So we'll have a look at the image that came out of the camera. Yeah, the very expensive camera. Yeah, the one that was over £2,000, that one. And that was what it came out with, which is shocking. It was set to automatic, and that was what it came out with. Now, what it should have looked like, obviously, is that. Much more like that. That is not the same image, it's the second image. So I took the first image, looked at it and thought that's shocking, and quickly took a second one. That's the second image, that's what it should have looked like. Now, can you recover an image that's as bad as that with blend modes? You could make an attempt at it, yes, and it would be easier than the one of Mike because it's the whole image. The whole image is useless unless you do something with it. Whereas with the mic one, I needed to selectively adjust it. So what I'm going to do is open that image, which happens to be, oh, please don't open in Photoshop. Oh no. I can normally double click these, but the reason that it's opening in Photoshop, for reasons best known to itself.
Is that a raw image?
That one is a raw image, and that's why I'm going to show it to you, but I need to get out of here first. Oh, what are you doing? I have literally got no control of Photoshop at the moment. It's opened it up in Camera Raw, which is fine and dandy, but the cancel button's dimmed out. Which means, how on earth am I going to get rid of that? Okay, I'm actually going to force quit Photoshop. There must be a dialog box somewhere of which it's not told me. So I'm going to force quit Photoshop. Oh, that's good, isn't it? What a demo that is. Right, let's get rid of it. Go away. I only recently installed Photoshop for a particular job. Before that, I could double click on it and it would open up in Affinity. So let's get it in Affinity Photo. Right, with this one, I'm just going to say develop it. I'm not going to do anything with it. That's now my image. That's as it came out the camera. I have a JPEG version of that from the camera, and that's what it looked like. So if I Command and J on there and make it multiply, we start to get some detail back. And if I duplicate, we get more and more detail back because it's multiplying the impact of the first layer. So this gives us 1 degree of repair, and that gives us 2 and 3 and 4. But obviously it's starting to look silly in terms of the colour. But that's what a blend mode can do for you. But if you have the raw image, which I did, then let's open up the raw image in Affinity Photo. This is the place to start fiddling, because with a raw image, despite the fact that that looks shockingly overexposed, it did capture all the information it needed to have a good image. It's just that the camera took one on itself, and when it did the immediate process in the camera, it got it wrong. So if we come into all of the options we have over here, you can see from the histogram, the problem with this is there's far too many light pixels on the right-hand side. This shows you pixels from the darkest pixels on the left to the lightest on the right, and that's what's wrong with it. So one thing to do, we should just take the exposure down. That looks much better. So we've got the colour back, we've got the detail back, all of the stuff around here with the cobbles, we've got all of that detail back, but we've not gone to silly levels with the colours. When we use the duplicate to get multiple copies of the background image and then changed it to a multiply blend mode, in essence, we bumped the saturation up and it got to silly levels. But if you have a raw image, then don't bother processing that as is and taking it in and then using blend modes to fix it. Use the raw processor that you have to do it, and then you've already got a repaired image. Now, I've only done one thing with that, which is I just changed the exposure of it because that's what was wrong with it. But you can see I've changed the exposure quite considerably. But that has actually recovered that image. Now, one thing to think about with blown out images is if something is completely blown out and it's not a raw image, you're never going to get detail back where it wasn't captured. But in a raw image, you have a much wider range of exposures captured. All you need to do is tease that out of the image at the point that you come to edit it like that. So I think of it in this way. To recover that image, I need to use Camera Raw. And I've done that here. I've not gone to any great degree with any of it. I've just recovered the exposure. Then I would develop that, and that would open it up in Affinity Photo. The type of edit I'd be looking to do in Affinity Photo, rather than Camera Raw, so, where do you do what, is this was a scarecrow festival in a place called Ray in the Fylde Coast in the UK. It's actually inwards a bit, isn't it? Near the lakes. Is it near the lakes? Sort of up that way anyway. Further north than we are in the UK. And there were scarecrows all over the place and they were amazing. Now, obviously this one, it's a scarecrow. So he's tied to this post, this lamp post. Maya was most interested. So it would look great if I could get rid of that post. And although you can do some degree of repairs in RAW, it's probably easier just to get rid of that in here. So what I'd be looking to do there is add an extra layer and then get my repair tool. Make sure I'm repairing from this layer, which is full of blank pixels, and below, blank pixels. If I said current, nothing would happen. And then in here, take that up in size and just go over the top of that. So quite broad at the top. There we go. And then need to get a little bit more detailed down here. So make it smaller and get rid of that. And then I'd have to be very detailed around the head to make sure that I didn't lose too much. It's a little bit muddy there, so do that. So I would go in and fix that properly, but what I'm showing you is that is the kind of edit that you would do in Affinity Photo. But the recovery process, whilst you can do it with a blend mode, and if you want a special effect, then use a blend mode, but that is the kind of repair that you can do within Camera Raw. So some things that you can do in blend modes doesn't mean you should do. But if that image hadn't have been a RAW image, if it had been a JPEG, I've got no option. All I can do then is start editing it in here. I can't run it through Camera Raw and recover lots and lots of things. So hopefully that'll explain, like, not just the fact that the blend mode can do it, but when you shouldn't do it. Okay. Hang on, don't want to come out of there totally. Just want to lose that image. Don't need to save that. Right. Do I have any more questions that I need to look at right now?
Yeah, Renee has just asked, is this where you'd use the develop persona?
Yes, it would automatically open that up in there. So we saw when I double-clicked it, opened up Photoshop. I have no idea what Photoshop's doing with itself. But it would open up and it would allow you to do that straight away. So yes, absolutely. Okay. Right, so we've done that bit. Where are we heading next? One of the overlay options that we've got here. So where did I put that image? You're down the bottom. What did I call you? I know what I'll show you next. Yeah, this would make sense to show you next. In the beginning, when I showed you some slides, there was a calculation, wasn't there? The add calculation, if you remember. And we looked at the theory of it. This is the practice of that blend mode. So what I've got here, take you through exactly what I've got. I have got 3 blocks. I've got 2 blocks that are a kind of muddy green colour, and I've got this grey block here. my base layer is the muddy block here over on this side. And then I've got this one, which is a blend. This is the blend layer that I'm going to make and add blend mode. At the moment, they're both the same. They're normal. And then I've got this one that's calculated value. And I'm going to use this to show you that the maths does actually work out. So we said if you had a shape and you had a pixel value of 50, and you had another one of 50, and then you applied the add blend mode, you'd end up with 100. This proves this. So in here we have our colour chooser. And in this block, if we look at the RGB value, we have 50, 50 and 0. And in this one here, the colour is 50, 50 and 0. This one doesn't matter, but it's grey, so it's 50% grey, which means it's 128, 128, 128. These are just numeric values for colours. But this one over here, we want to change this to the add blend mode. And if the bottom one is 50 and the top one is 50, have a guess what this should look like if we apply the add blend mode. And I think you all got it right the first time. So I'm going to click on here with this window open. You should instantly see the change. But will you? Will there be a change? Ooh, excitement, much excitement. So I'm going to go into normal and we're going to change this one to add. No change. That's because it's not actually changing pixels, is it? We have this object selected over here and 3/4 of the pixels are still a 50-50. But this little bit in the middle here is also still 50. What we're seeing is the interaction between the two layers. But we want to know what colour value that is in the middle. So here's the easiest way to do that. I'm going to grab the colour picker over here and go down over there and hover over it. That puts it on here, it loads it in. And with this grey shape selected, click that to apply it. And now this shape is the same colour as that one there. And look at the value we have, 100 and 100. So that proves that the maths works. So that's the most basic one, but that is how all of these work. It does not change anything on the base layer or anything on the blend layer. It's just the interaction between the two that you are now seeing. That's got to be true, because if I change that back from add to normal, I don't want that square to have a different colour applied. It's not got a different colour applied, which is why even when it's in add blend mode, it's still in here has 50 and 50. So hopefully that explains the theory of it, that it genuinely is doing what you would imagine it to be doing. It is a mathematical calculation. There are many videos on YouTube if you want to go really deep into this blend mode does this and it does that, and it's all very intricate, and 20 minutes later you've got calculus going. But we want to look at the practical implications of this. So I'm going to close that one down. Right, where is... I had a file. I wonder where I put it. Did I leave it in there? I think I could have done. There we go. I did. Right, found it. This should be familiar to at least one person here, but probably more of you. And that's why I picked it. It's a lovely, lovely thing, isn't it? But it's a little bit hazy. But I'm going to use this a couple of times to show a couple of different things. But with this, if you want to improve it, so we've got our background. Now I've also in here got lots of other images to show you later. But this one is fairly straightforward. If you're wondering, Kim's going to tell us where it is, isn't she? It should be obvious from the screen, but don't look at that. Look at the picture. Look at the picture and then Kim will tell us. Right, I'd like that. It's all hazy. It's got a definite colour cast on it and it's hazy. So I'm going to duplicate that background layer. So Command and J again. Right, darken won't do anything. What would multiply do? Remember, it will make it darker, but that might not be the look we're looking for. If we want it to look like nighttime, maybe. We've got lots of contrast But the problem with the contrast that's been added is it's made it too dark. We've got contrast, but it's made it too dark. None of these particularly, again, if you want that kind of impact, that's great if you want the skyline. Each one of these, notice again, making it darker, apart from darker colour, which isn't, because darken and darker colour are both the same, but darker colour is more impactful. Darken and darker colour will have no impact whatsoever because the pixels on the layers are identical. Lighten and lighter colour will also have no impact because the pixels on each layer are the same. But screen will give us a certain different look, as will colour dodge. Oh dear, that's bad. As will add. In this case, if we start moving down to the ones that are incredibly useful, overlay is quite nice. That's giving us contrast, but we're losing something in the sky, aren't we? There's a bit of detail gone out of the sky. But overlay is very, very nice. That's working very nicely. And of course, like I said, what you can do is change the opacity to reduce the impact of that. Now, what I actually wanted to do, I thought it would be much nicer if the sky were a deeper blue. So that was one thing that I wanted to do with the sky. So we've already got this overlay. So that's our blend mode. And the blend mode we applied is overlay. And this is our base layer. Right, now I'm going to put a blank layer in. So there's no pixels on this at all. And I don't know yet whether I want it this side or the other side of the overlay blend mode. So I'm going to turn the overlay blend mode off at the moment. Let's have a look what happens. But what I want in here is to put in a gradient. So I'm going to put a gradient down there. Now, obviously, not this kind of gradient. That's not going to work at all. At this end of the gradient, in here, I don't particularly want anything. So I'm going to click on there, and opacity-wise, I want to lose that. But I do on the other end, so let's sort the other end out first, then show you what I'll do with it. I don't want that white. I want it a kind of sky colour, probably about there. At this end, I'll go for something very, very similar. Let's take it back over there and down there a bit. But I want the opacity of that end to be 0, like that. Right, now I've got the right colours on my gradient, I can go back to it, and I actually want the gradient to work downwards from there. Unfortunately, and then I lose the colour, crying out loud. Right, let's go back and put that in again. Joy. Why have you selected the white in there? Never mind. Let's get that. And then go to the black end, get the blue colour. But it doesn't really matter about that because we're going to take the opacity of it down to 0. Right, now we have some kind of sky in there. But it's just sat there. Solid pixels right on top of it. On a gradient, but Now, with this one, we could darken it and it will show us the darker pixels, but that's not a good look either. And really, we don't particularly want it to be darker in that way. Linear burn's not bad, but we don't particularly want it in that way. But if we go down to some of these, overlay's quite nice. Soft light's quite nice. Let's have it at overlay. That's quite nice. And then, of course, I've got this other blend mode that's set to overlay in the first place. But by having the sky on here, you can see the difference. You've lightened up the entire image with that, but darkened at the same time and got contrast back into the buildings and the sea underneath it. So did Kim notice that that was Seattle? I thought she might, on account of the fact she lives there. So that one, if you look at the original one. So we've now got, with that one, 2 blend modes that are interacting together with the background layer and making that just a much better, punchier, no, it looks beautiful now image, doesn't it? So it doesn't have to be the whole thing. It doesn't have to be because you're hiding something. And the second one, this one here, I only wanted to impact the top. Now, you could just as easily, let's duplicate that. You could, in here, if you wanted to make the sea a different colour, flip that round, pull it down. Now we've got bright blue sea underneath because, again, overlay. So normal, overlay. Nice. That on, and now it's even bluer. So that's the sea, much bluer. That's the sky, much better. So that one was 1 base layer and 3 blend layers. So the minimum is 2, but you can do as many as you like to get the effect that you're actually looking for. We will return to Seattle later. So I'll leave Seattle open while we head off to some of the others. So I'm going to show you one of the creative ones now. So let me get into my data again. This is when you're not trying to correct something. This is when you are doing something deliberately creative. I'll show you what I've got in here. I'm not sure if that is Seattle. Maybe. I think that's made up, but you never know. I've pretended it's London for the demonstration. Right, what I've got in here is I've got a complete thing at the back, which I will show you shortly. But I've got the text at the top, which you can't see. You can't see the text because it's white. Even I can't see the text. It's on there somewhere. I hope. I hope it hasn't disappeared. Right, is the text there? Are you there? Ooh, I don't see the text. And yet it says alt text, so you should do. It's vanished. Never mind, I'll put it back in by hand. Okay, so we won't worry about the text. There should be some text in it. But we've got a base layer at the back, and that is just a normal photo. Doesn't need anything in terms of recovery or colour change or anything like that. Then I've got this blend layer, and all that is black pixels and white pixels. So in what way would I want that blending with the background? And this is one of those things where you're thinking, I'm trying to make a poster here. So that art text, the text should actually have said, good grief, that's tiny. Let's have that much bigger. Maybe even bigger than that. Right, it should have said, no, we'll see you in London. We best say 2022, hadn't we? It's getting like that. I had that as Trajan Pro, I do believe. Perfect. Right. So I shall put that there. And I think I had that white. So we could make that text white while we're at it. Right. Okay. So we've got everything we need. We will worry about the text shortly, though. Right, so we've got these 2 layers first of all. This is the blend layer. We need to blend this into the background layer so we can see that text and get a nice effect. And what blend mode would that be? And this is the way where you go and you think, oh, what does darken do? Oh, that's quite nice. Multiply. Exactly the same. It's exactly the same because it makes it darker and you can't get darker than black. So all of these are going to be exactly the same because black is black is black. You go to lighten and get totally different impact. Totally different. This time, you don't see the black pixels. You lose the black pixels. In all of these, you lose the black pixels. So hence, darken, you'll see the dark pixels. Lighten, you'll see the lighter pixels. So any of these will do me. Doesn't really matter. Because what I actually want to see is, I know I had that blue. That was the colour I had. It's all come back to me now. It was a lovely blue colour like that. And now I've got a poster. The alternative to that, could you do that another way? So earlier on, questions were being asked about, oh, but could you do it this way? Could you do it that way? Yes, you could. Absolutely, you could. What you could have done with that layer, instead of changing it like that, is you could have started making selections, couldn't you? That would have worked. So if we think about what we ended up with lighten and what that normally looks like, if we'd have made a selection of the white pixels, or even inverse this one, but if we'd have made a selection, we could have put a mask on it. But isn't it just faster to change the blend mode? So in this case, I wanted to see the buildings at the bottom but constrained to where the black pixels were, and then put the text on it. So that's kind of a creative use for it. Now, that was only using the darkened ones, which gave you a black skyline and the pixels behind it, or the lighter ones, which gave you a white area at the top to put your text on. You try all of the others and you'll get very different impacts with them. So the lighten and the darken are operative on the black and the white. When you start going through the other ones, you get much more creative options. I don't think overlay does that any favours at all, but that one's not bad if you want a kind of reflection on it. And then each one of these will get more harsh as you go down. So with hard light, because it's black and white, all of the, I mean, that one, oh dear, right? But these, no impact at all because it's black and it's white. And these are hard light, vivid light, linear light. So it's impacting it in no way at all, like these top two here. You've then got difference, and that will show you the difference between them. But again, that's not a good creative look. But I will show you where difference is a really good idea. You carry on down here, and again, that one's another quite nice one. You're subtracting it so you can see through the bottom, and then it gives you that like navy area at the top, that's not black, to put the text on if that's where you want to put it. The new one, new kid on the block, was divide. That gives you the complete inverse of what we actually had it applied to. We had the bottom bit showing the back, the base layer, and the top was white. In this one, that completely reverses it. So if we go back up to what we had, which was screen, and then you come down to divide, you've got the complete opposite of that. Then you've got some colour options, so the hue of it, the saturation of it. Now that's not having too much of an impact here because these pixels are black and white. But the luminosity will, because that's to do with how light and dark it is, not what actual colour it is. And then there's the really weird ones, which might work for you. Average doesn't look bad, it's a little bit muddy, but it's not bad. That I don't think so, unless it's a horror film or a TV show of some description. That one's not bad though, because it's very impactful from the pixels underneath. It's like multiplying it by something as well. Then you've got your glow, which that's going to change the colours completely. Contrast negate, I wouldn't like to try and explain what it does in terms of numerics, but it's negating the contrast to the point you can see the details of what's behind it. Erase we're going to come back to. But I think here screen looks pretty good, and then I put the text on the top of it. And to be absolutely perfect with that, I would take that text and I would pick a blue colour from down here. But that's a creative use for the blend modes. What else do we have here? Oh, I've got some good ones for you. So let's go in here and we will have a look at, should we turn the lights on? Would that be a good one? Should we turn the lights on? Right, I've got two options here when it comes to turning the lights on. So I'm looking for the image. That's one of them and that's the other one. So we'll go with this one first. So I will save that and close it, coming back to Seattle shortly. But this one, I'm going to turn the lights on. That's what it looks like right now. But it didn't start live like that, because that's complete. It started live in the daylight with that light turned off. And I took it from that to that. I know it's grossly overdone, but that's so you can actually see the impact that you can have. Not one pixel was edited in terms of me changing the colour of it. The whole thing is non-destructive. It takes a few modes, as you can see here. So let's start with the first one. So I'm going to turn that off and we'll start again. So the first thing to do with this, I need to make it darker, the whole thing. I need to make it look like it's night time. So the first thing I need to do with that is to duplicate that background layer. And then change it, not to darken because the pixels are the same, but change it to multiply. And now it looks like dusk, just going down. But there's no light there. Now the light, you could do all of this on one layer, but I choose not to because I might need to tweak and change it a bit. So if you look at what we've got in here, we've got lots of different layers. Just one thing before we start doing that. If you want it darker still, duplicate it again. But I thought that was a little bit too dark. So I'll get rid of that one. Right, so we'll work on it like this. I will then put a blank pixel layer in there. And we will zoom in to this light, which is not turned on. And we need to turn the light on, which is easy. We're going to need a brush. So let's get B for brush. Why is that not working? That's better. Right, you can see how big that is because we were using that brush on Mike's thing. Right, here you need to pick a colour, and I've picked this yellow. Yellow's not a bad colour for this one, but it might be that you need to take it a little bit more so it's like an orangey glow. But I'm going to stick to the yellow for this because that's what I did before. So we'll leave it like that. Now, I could just click, right, turn the light on. Now, yes, that lamp would look like that. It would have a glow outside it. So that's the first thing. It probably would. It might even be more than that. So if we come out a little bit like that, right? Again, I'm not concerned about the fact it's realistic. It's the fact that we're using the blend modes. So that one at the moment, in fact, I have naughty me. I went wrong there and nobody said a word. Nobody said a word. I put them on the pixels. I put them on the background here. No, it needs to go on that layer. I don't want to actually edit the pixels. So I will put that on there, and not a good look because it's completely obscuring what's below it. That's because it's not the correct blend mode. We need to change the blend mode. But what do we actually need to do with this? So if we go in, darken's not bad. Multiply's making it much darker. So remember, all of these are going to make it darker. So it very much depends on the look that you want. All of these are going to make it lighter, and none of those are looking good at the moment. But overlay enables us to keep the lamp at the front and the glow around it, but not impacting the colour of the lamp. So the multiply makes everything look dark and muddy, but this overlay gives us a really good look. So let's choose overlay for that. So far, so good. But the lamp is glowing, but it doesn't actually look like the lamp is lit. So what I would do for that is, this one I would have as the glow. And I do recommend that you start naming layers at this point. I would have another one, which is actually the bulb. And I don't just want to draw over it like that. I would need to have a much harder brush. Maybe not 100%, but much harder than that. Because I don't want it spilling out too much. Now I'm looking at that and I'm thinking that's still far, possibly a bit, that looks better. That looks better. So put that there. So I'm constraining it to the inside where the bulb would actually be. I'm also going to take it down and put a little bit at the side, because the side wouldn't just be like that. It wouldn't have nothing there. It might have something like that, just at the side of it, and maybe a little bit underneath it too. Now, that doesn't look realistic at the moment. No, it doesn't. Because at the moment, it's a normal blend mode. But if we went in and we changed that to overlay, we've been able to retain all of the blackness of the lamp, but actually light it up from the inside. So we've now got the bulb and the glow. What else was missing? Well, I added two elements more to this. I added a downlight where it was kind of coming down from the light. Again, I would put that on a separate layer and call that downlight. This way I can change the impact of these individually. So on this one, I will have that set to 0 hardness because I want it really fluffy, really, really soft at the edges, and then come down here. So the light's coming down here like this. Obviously, looks horrific. Yes, it does, because we need to change the blend mode. So change that to overlay, starts to look better. But I would say the impact of that light as it comes down, you probably want it to look less than the impact up here where it's closer to the bulb. So the blend mode, actually I put that on soft light, didn't I? And I meant overlay. So it's far too much. But you can lessen the impact of that by reducing the opacity of it, so it gives you a suggestion of the fact that there is the yellow from the lamp without overdoing it. Another option would be soft light. Soft light is the same as overlay, it's just softer. It's a more gentle approach to it, so soft light might help. You're going to put soft light on it, you can take the opacity up a bit more. So about there, just to give the suggestion that that is not constrained to a circle at the top of that. The last thing that I wanted to do to give a kind of impression of it maybe being raining a bit and the reflection of the light was to put some light actually on the street here. So have it kind of lit up there around the lamp like that. Obviously far too much, but you need to change the blend mode. When you change the blend mode to overlay, you get a nice glow from that. And because each individual element of that is on a separate layer, not only could you change the blend mode, so the downlight becomes soft light, not overlay, but you can independently change the opacity, and that might suit your purpose better. So taking it down a little bit. If you compare that with that, that might look overdone. So you can change the opacity, but you're not changing the opacity of the bulb or the glow because that's the source of the light and where it's coming from. Okay, good place to stop and ask for questions. Got any more questions about that?
Rene says, it's not a question, he says, I would copy the lantern and paste it as a separate layer over the bulb, but that would probably be too much work.
You could do that, but another thing to think about is I've done that. So I've got my original layer and I've got this secondary layer that I've applied the multiply to get the darkness overall. If I duplicate it again to put the lamp on the top and then create a mask to hide the rest of it, etc., you're increasing the file size as you go as well. In fact, if you are absolutely positive that you're never going to want to go back to, because that looks really bad, you're never going to want to go back to daylight, you could merge the bottom two, but I never do. I always leave the original image at the bottom, always call background, and then I work up from there. But I would have as fewer layers as possible, particularly when the layer is a copy of the background layer, because it does increase the file size dramatically. But with the right blend mode, you don't have to worry about the fact that you can't see the black of the lamp because the yellow is in front of it. If it bothers you to that degree, so let's say the bulb here or the glow, let's say the glow is bothering you because it's covering up the black at the beginning, then what you could do is put a mask on it and get your brush tool really tiny like that. And put a mask on it so that is pure black rather than having the glow on it. That would be another option. You could do that. Okay, that it for questions?
That's it.
Right, I'll answer more at the end. Let's move on from turning the lights on to turning the lights on a different scene. Right, this is a street scene. I don't know where this is. I'm thinking it's America because we don't have street lights like that, do we? But uninspiring, unfortunately. When you stand there and you think, oh, I'm going to take a picture of that, and you do, in your mind, those lights probably look amazing and they're casting a beautiful glow, all right? But then you look at the picture and think, no, that didn't work. So you can have fun with blend modes as well. So there's two things that I could do with this. The first thing I did with it was make it a night scene. So now it looks like a photograph that you've taken, and that was what it actually looked like. It's very dark, but you've got that impact on those lights. You can also see it's not a yellow glow, it's an orange glow. And you've got the glow on the street as well. But the whole thing is miles away from what the original photo looked like. That is done with lots of different blend modes. So let's start that one. So the first thing that I did was duplicate that. And I wanted it darker, so I multiplied it. Not darken, because they're the same. So I multiplied it. That was pretty good as far as it went. Then I started working on the lights themselves. And the principle of the lights was absolutely identical to the last one. So I won't spend that much time doing it, but I got a brush. It was a soft brush because it was a glow. So make sure the thing's about the right size. I have got this on square pixels and I want it on just a paintbrush. So that's good, about that size. Don't want it black though, but the colour that I want, if I made it yellow and put that on it, it doesn't match. That's already got a colour on it. And it's a much more orangey colour. So what I did was I actually used the colour picker to go and pick one of the orange colours. So something like that. And I used that one. So, I think that was the one there, wasn't it? There we go, we'll have that one that we've just picked. Right, making sure I'm on the lights layer. And literally, I'm just going to do this very quickly. You'll get the idea. Trick with this is, when you've done the front one, you're moving further away, so make the brush a little bit smaller. A little bit smaller. A little bit smaller every time you move backwards, and that will make it look more realistic. So we've got from that the actual glow on the lamps. Then I put a glow around the bottom, but that might need to have an opacity change on it. So I'll put that as a glow, and I literally put that like around each one. Again, change the brush as you go. Quite tiny there. Let's move in so I can see it. And by the time we get to the back one, very, very little. But there you go. So we're near the lights. Right. And then, of course, we need to change these blend modes. And you'll get a certain look with overlay. Soft light, same as overlay, but more gentle. Or if you wanted it to look nuclear, so it looks much more fiery with hard light, as does vivid light. So these just get, as you go down, much stronger with each one. So if I wanted it incandescent, let's have it that way, the glow would probably look better as either overlay or soft light. There's a little bit of difference between them. I think overlay probably works better with that. Now, the other thing I did with it was I put a vignette on it. So I put an empty pixel layer and got, I would say, very brownish rather than black, but you could do black. So for speed, I'm going to do black and take that up and just colour over it to get a nice soft edge with it. So the whole thing isn't lit up like that. And we've got a lit street scene. So these were all the things that we added to it. So I'm going to group those together and toggle it on and off. That's the before, that's the after, which is a huge difference and probably what your eye saw. Probably. Right, so we turn the lights on. The other thing that I did with this one, and it does work with this image, is make it a kind of hazy image, much hazier. That effect is called the Orton effect, and it actually works really well with certain content, like Christmas trees. So I've got two here. There's that one, or there's that one. Oh, actually, I've got three. Oh, there's that one. That one is a good way to demonstrate it, but we'll start with that one. And with the Orton effect applied to it, it's a kind of dreamy, misty look. Now that's really intense, but you could dial that impact back a bit. So that's the kind of look we're going for. That's the before and that's the after. To actually show the effect really well, this is probably a better image to show it to you. Not that one, the last one. Right, let's close that one. And you. That one is a good one to show it to you. That's the original. Now, it would be very difficult any other way with an image like this to make it glow more. You know, in your mind, they glowed more than that when you took that photo. The Orton effect would enable you to do that without changing the rest of the image. So I'm not sitting there pushing pixels around saying move that way and glow more, or getting a red brush and trying to draw over the top of it. All of this is just blend modes. In fact, you can fiddle with these with the opacity and get totally different looks. So it's that the glow is spreading out as I take that one down. So let's do that one. Really simple. All you need to do is start with a background layer and duplicate it, as ever. Now with this one, you need to actually blur it. And you need to blur it quite considerably. And there are two options for blurring it. You can apply a blur filter, which is permanent. Pixels are harmed if you use filter blur. But if you go to layer, live filter layer blur, it won't be. This one is a live filter and you'll be able to edit it. So with this one, I'm going to blur it like crazy, 100%. Blur, blur, blur. This is what's creating the glow, or what will create the glow. And the beauty of having that live filter layer is you can pretend it's not there if you want, but you can also go in and edit it and think, oh, that was a little bit much. I'll have it at 40%, 40 pixels instead of 100. But I'm going to leave it up there at 100. Right, and the only thing I need to do with that then is change the blend mode and change that one to screen, which gives us a glow. And that's exactly what we had in here. And then duplicate that one. Now, the reason to duplicate that one rather than the background layer is that that layer, so I'm going to actually name these, that one's screen, because otherwise I say background and there's multiple ones, is you've already applied the blur and the next layer needs to be blurred as well. So I would then duplicate that, or Command and J, so let's do the Command and J. But this time I don't want it screen because now it's starting to look silly. This one was overlay, and that gave us the lovely blur, but we didn't lose the contrast, we didn't lose how blurry it was, it just started to glow. So if you think about that, one's now overlay, so I'll change that to overlay so we know what we're talking about. Take the two of those, toggle them off. You've not lost the detail in the image, but you've made it glow, which would be very difficult any other way. You can then, in here, change the opacity. So this one takes the glow away. So if we take that down to about 80-ish. And the overlay, that makes it glow more at the top. So I can take down, so I keep the detail and I want it to glow more. So you can get really great effects with that. So let me just group those together. And I always say OTN on the night, which means my demo. That's what we've done with it this time. But that one is that's at 100%, so it's much more impactful. But we start to lose the details, like these little lines here. Whereas you take down the opacity and you retain some of that, and you get a lovely glow. How cool is that? How cool is that? Love that. Right, that's turning the lights on. We'll do the difference one, because the difference one is what I call a difference you will probably not use other than an administrative blend mode. And this is where it's good as an administrative blend mode. Right, this was a scan and it was a huge image and it didn't fit on my flatbed scanner. There was no way it was going through my sheet fed scanner. So think of this as like A3 or bigger. And I had to scan it twice, have it hanging off the scanner. And I thought, I'll fix that in post, like you do. That. Okay, so what you need to do with it is line it up. It's really simple, isn't it? So I'll just drag this over here and like that's about right. No, it's not about right. It's not joined. You can see around the join. It's not right at all. So that's what our problem is. We have to grab hold of this and then play Bernie the Bolt to try and get it lined up. Now, with this one, it's so easy, you probably could. But why struggle? If you change the blend mode to difference, where the pixels are the same will be black. And where they're not, they'll be white. So, in here, the black pixels, they're white on both layers. There's no content in them. So when it matches, it's black. So if I start moving this pixel by pixel, you can see it moving. But I need to try and get them lined up. I think it's really obvious when you get it in this mode that, when that and that, which are the same, and that are lined up, they'll be black. So if we move that down and keep moving it down, you see, it starts, as they start to merge, you get just like a ghosting on the outside. But as you keep going down, the entire overlap between the two changes to black. And then it's absolutely perfectly aligned. If it's 1 pixel out, you'll be able to tell. That's to the left. That's 1 pixel up. That's 1 pixel down. And that's 1 pixel to the right. 1 pixel out, you look at that normal, and you'll think that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Looks all right. You can't tell as easily as you can with difference. You will be absolutely certain that they are spot on accurate. And with something like this, which was a scan, I'm never really going to want that in 2 halves. It wasn't a choice, it was forced upon me by the equipment. So if I change that once I'm absolutely confident that that is lined up, change that back to normal, grab the 2 of these, and if you were, well, I might want to move them, then you could make a group, couldn't you? But you could also, with these, and I think, is the background? No, the actual scan is white as well. So the fact that the background's white is totally irrelevant. There was a white background on the scan itself. But you can then, in here, merge them. And now you've got a copy at the top, so let's turn all of these off, that is now one image. And then what I can do with that, in fact, what I could do, let's undo that. Right, there we go. Is that right? I think that's right. We could lose this background because we don't really need it, do we? It's these 2 pieces that we need. So if we merge those 2, we can actually bin these 2 pieces because we're never going to need them. And what we've done is actually fix that completely. I don't even need an artboard that's as big as that because that's the size of the artwork there, like that. And I fixed it with difference. Now you can use that with photos, no problem at all. So if we go back to Seattle and we lose everything that I've done with it. So let's take all of those and put those in a group and turn them off. So we're back to the original Seattle image. If I was to duplicate that and somebody's been fiddling, you know, maybe alter the size fractionally, not enough that you would even tell. In fact, that's a bit much. Let me zoom back out. It's got a mind of its own at the moment. Right, so let's say somebody who's been editing has done that with it. And you wouldn't necessarily notice, it's not screaming at me. I can tell it's fractionally off, but if that was down like that, you would not really be able to tell that there were 2 on there and something's happened. But as a check, if you grab the top one and you go to difference, there's a difference, isn't there? But as I think, okay, it's matched up at the top and it looks like somebody's resized it. As I resize that back, these pixels are changing. They're black where the pixels are the same. And we want to see that they are completely the same. And there you go. They are now the same. So there are 2 layers there. And that's why I said you'll hardly ever use the difference in a way of, oh, I want to leave that applied because that's amazing. No, it just makes them black. But it's a good utility blend mode to work with. And I did promise one more, which was we had great fun and games with this yesterday, trying to make it do what we wanted it to do. Right, there is another blend mode. Right, so let me make sure in this I have got everything turned off apart from 2 copies of the Seattle Skyline. There is this erase, and it erases. That's interesting. Why would I want to do that? Right, you may want to do that, not with a Skyline, not like that. So we'll get that back to normal. We have the text here that says Seattle. And you might want some kind of artistic look. Now, I've seen this done, because you're going to say, why would I ever want that? I've seen this done at Old Trafford. At the front of Old Trafford, the home of Manchester United, there's these huge windows. And when there's something special happening, they put huge posters on them. But the windows are actually the offices. And inside the offices, the lights are on. So they kind of knock out words and then the inside lights glow through. So they basically want a hole in the artwork. That's sounding like a possibility, isn't it, with that erase? If we go down to there and do that, we are actually punching a hole through it using what is the blend mode. And you can see at the background, it's not white, it's actually transparent. It's pushed through it. Now, we talked about blend modes being 2 or more layers. So what I'm going to do with these is get that out of the way. So we'll put it at the bottom. NIU, not in use. Right, we've got this and we've got our background. Now, we actually have 2 copies of the background and the thing's punched through both of them, not just one. You might want to create an effect where you punch a hole through something like that, but then have something behind it, like the pretty flowers. So the pretty flowers are here at the background. Let's push that on. That doesn't work very well because it's punching a hole through the whole lot, straight down the layer stack. So close, no t-shirt. Now we definitely only need one layer, so I'm going to get rid of one layer. So we're working with these 3 layers. How do we make it that the text punches through the Seattle skyline but not the pretty flowers at the background? Right, let's take these 2 and group them together. And doing that means that what's happening in the group, like, what is it they say? What happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. What happens in the group stays in the group. So now we do have a hole that's being pushed through the Seattle text, but we can also put something behind it. So while it might look like, well, that's pretty useless because it goes through every layer, not if you constrain that by putting it inside a group. It doesn't. Okay, we all had enough now. What do I have? I've got one thing more. Let's do one thing more. Right, let me get rid of these. We'll have the pretty flowers, I think. Have we got enough space on the pretty flowers? No, I think it's the short answer. So we won't have the pretty flowers. No, let's use one of our Seattle skylines. Right, we'll use that one. Right, you can use a blend mode to actually put stuff over the top of these things. Really simple. Like a calendar. Ooh, we made some calendars previously in Affinity Designer. Fantastic. We even saved them as an asset library. Even better. Oh dear, there's no assets in here. So we've got an option. We could either take this image to Affinity Designer where the assets are, or we could go into Affinity Designer or Affinity Publisher, all work the same way, and get hold of said assets. So that's my branding assets, but we also have the calendar creation kit where we have all the months, where the first is on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday or Sunday, and we have an extra table down there. So let's export these, export the assets, put them on the desktop. Desktop, no, not documents, desktop. And these were calendars. Okay, and then we can come out of Affinity Designer. So on my desktop, we have our calendar assets, which we can import into here. So import assets from the desktop, calendars, okay. And we have them loaded in here. Not the most contrastful I've seen over here, but we can at the very top level have those showing as a list, and that way at least we can see the text. The reason that you can't see anything too well is because I've left these deliberately very plain so you can edit them. So there's our calendar, and you can bring that on. Now at the moment it's transparent, so that's fine as far as it goes, but if we would like this to merge in nicer with these, you can format the entire table however you want, and these things are editable. So if we wanted to say that is St. Patrick's Day, we could actually change that on the calendar. Although, oh yes, the month did start on the 1st. Oh, how organised was that? But you can also change the blend modes. So, darkening won't make a jot of difference because the pixels are black to start with. It can't make them any darker. But lighten will. Mostly useless. So this is where you come down to these ones that you will probably use more. So overlay is actually overlaying it and it's interacting with the pixels below it. Soft light's the same but less. And then you can go really silly with these ones. Or you can get some nice effects down here. Which one did I go for? I can't remember, but it looked quite nice. Must have been either reflect. Definitely wasn't that one. And I definitely didn't want holes pushed through it. I think it was one of these. But never mind, let's just randomly pick one. Let's go for our overlay. And there you go. So that was actually created in Affinity Designer and then brought in here via the assets. But the Affinity Suite means it doesn't matter where the file started, you can open each and every file from Publisher, Photo and Designer in all of the other applications. Why might you want to do that? Well, if you didn't have the benefit of having created the calendar creation kit like I did, You might want to take this photo into Designer where the assets are, because you don't want those assets inside Photo. But you can organise it any way you like. Any way you like. In fact, there was... yeah, I actually made those from tables. So the calendar creation kit started life in Publisher. It was exported to Assets, imported to Designer, and then exported again from Designer, and then finally imported into Photo. Right, do we have any other questions, Mike, at this moment that I could deal with? Do I have lots?
No, one from Renee.
Mm-hmm.
When you reach the effect you like, can you save it as a preset blend mode?
A preset blend mode. What do you mean, a preset blend mode? Can you give me a little bit more information, Renee? If you mean the opacity and stuff.
If it helps at all, it was during the Scooby-Doo demo.
Not really, if I'm thinking correctly what you're thinking. With something like the Scooby-Doo one, there would be nothing to save in terms of options on that. So not really, no. Oh, if what you mean is, if you mean something entirely different. So let's say this one here, which is the table. If you wanted to have a blend mode like that with no content in it, ready for you to put the bulb glow on it, then yes, you could name the layer ready. You could change the blend mode. We had, I think it was overlay for that, wasn't it? And then at that point, you can then go get your brush tool. You can get your orange thing and you can start lighting up these buildings. And instead of painting on there and then having to change the blend mode's already there and waiting, and then I can change these down so they don't look so silly. They just look like sun shining off them. So yes, you can do that. Another option, which I didn't bother showing because don't do it. It's bad news. It's bad news. If we look at this one, which is the background of the flower, this is... Go on.
I meant I would like the number of layers with blend modes saved as a preset.
Yes, you could, but not in the way you think. So yes, you could, because anything you do over here, you can create a macro for. Does that mean a session on macros would be a jolly good idea? Because Jonathan asked about those not long ago. What you can do with a macro is record yourself doing it, and then it will play it back and it will put however many layers you want in there. It will do exactly what you record in any number of future files. So yes, you could do that. The other thing in terms, well, let me think about it then. In that case, you wouldn't need to know what I was about to say, but I'll say it anyway, just for the sake of completeness. Right, I've got the brush tool selected down here, and I'm actually on this layer. So if I do that, I have drawn over those pixels, and the pixels in the leaves have long gone. I've actually destroyed them. I can't bring them back. That's why we don't do that. That's why we always add an extra layer and then do whatever we think is a jolly good idea, which 9 times out of 10 isn't. But you can just turn it on and off. But what you could do is, going back to this, you have your, let's say I want with this squiggle to have that multiplied. So that's what it looks like multiplied. Right, I'm going to leave that there as a comparison so you can see it. But I've got the brush tool and I've got my orange pixels. And I'm drawing straight on the background. And when I do, it's 100% opaque and it's destroying all of those pixels. But every blend mode that you have available in here, you have available on the brush. They're exactly the same. So this overlay, if I take that and I start drawing on it on there, it's having exactly the same impact. Well, it should be. It should be, unless I did something weird with this. I did multiply. What did I put on the brush? Overlay. Okay, let me undo that, get rid of all of that. There we go. Right, so instead of overlay, I want multiply on the brush. Not colour burn, multiply, right? I'm drawing straight on the background. So it will do exactly the same. It's got exactly the same colour tones. It doesn't look any different at all. But the second way of doing that with the brush is destructive. I now can't get rid of that unless I do the undo, right? But the pixels, I'm going to turn that off. but the rest of that is burnt onto it. So that's why you don't do it. That's why you put it on a layer of its own. But you can change a brush from brushing on 100% pixels to actually brushing with a blend mode if you choose to. As I say, don't do it unless there's absolutely, you know exactly what you're doing and you're never, ever, ever going to want to go and undo it. I would always use layers. I have never bothered with blend modes on a brush, but you can do blend modes on a brush if you want to. Any other questions? Or shall we...
A few people would like macros.
Okay, put down macros. Put that on the sheet, Mike. Right, I could do one more thing. Shall I do one more thing? I could do one more thing. This shows you actually building up completely from scratch with an image. So I'll open it up. Last opened in 2014. And I do not want it to open in Photoshop. So I'm going to open this in Affinity Photo. There we go. That's the finished thing. But it didn't start life like that. It started life. See how badly that started life. Let's take all of this and toggle those off. It didn't even start life like that. It started life like that. That was it. And then I put the individual pieces together and made that poster. So let's try that. So let's take all of those and put them in a group. Out of the way. I'm going to start with this background. And what I did with it, I've actually grouped that together. So this was the original I started with. And I duplicated it and I made it multiply. And that made it darker. Then I duplicated that again, multiplied, and it made it darker. So I've got 3 copies of that, making it darker. So there's the background sorted out. I think the next thing I put on was probably the photo, which I've got in here. But what I'm going to do with the photo, rather than use that photo, how about we use that one of Mike? Poor Mike. That was exposure correction, wasn't it? And it was overexposed Mike, which did I leave that open? Don't think I did. Right, overexposed Mike. Yep, there we go. So there he is. Oh yes, we could have him, couldn't we? So what I could do with that, I can either take the entire document, because I can do what in Affinity Photo? You should be screaming at me. What I could do, did I actually just, hang on, where's the one I'm looking for? I've got too many open now. That's the one I want. Right. I can say File and Place, and then go and find it. And I'm going to find it over there in exposure correction, and it was the mic one, and it was that one. Because what I can do with this now, so let's put that in, and it gives me my little icon here to put it in. So I'm going to click at the top there we go, move it into the right place. That's an embedded document, which means I can go back in and edit it. It's a smart object equivalent of. So I'm going to make that bigger there and put him in the middle. I do believe I had behind him a piece of paper. So I had some old paper textures like this. I think that's the one that it came from. So I'm going to open that with a photo because I need to turn layers off. I don't want this on it. That's where it came from. And I've got different looks to the paper. So I could have that one or all of these by just turning these off. That one looks pretty decent. So I'm actually going to take that one. How am I going to do that? I'm actually going to save it. And I will save it into the same place it came from, old paper. But this time, when it saves, it'll be saved as an Affinity Photo file. Which means, when I go back into the wanted poster, I can do the same again. I can file place. And this means each one of these is the equivalent of a smart object, which means I can go edit it at a different time and place to do different things with it. So that one needs to be a bit wider, not as tall, and it needs to be not in the background. So let's get these out of the background because we've finished with the background for the moment. And let's get Mike on the top of it. Oh, doing quite nicely so far. Right, we're going to have to make that much smaller because we're not going to want all of that, are we? But if we lost the top of it and the bottom, we might just have enough to go on with here. So this layer looks a bit odd. It looks like it's floating on top of the other one. So if I put an effect on that of an outer shadow, that should look more realistic. There we go. So now it doesn't look quite so much like it's floating. There we go. Right, and that leaves Mike in the middle. We're going to need the text, which is really simple, and I've got a stamp somewhere as well. But what I need to do with that one of Mike at the moment is put a mask on it. So go and get my brush tool. I do not need it that colour, that's for sure. I need it black. So let's get a nice black colour on the brush. Are you a brush at the moment? I do believe you are. So let's do that. Why are you still yellow? Crying out loud, come on. Right. That is what we want. You're still yellow. And you shouldn't be doing that on a mask. Fair enough. If you're acting up. You're still yellow. Unbelievable. Crying out loud, what's wrong with this brush? Have I got the right brush? I have got the right brush. It's just acting up. Let's see what that does on here. Ooh. Actually, that's not bad at all. As it happens, it matches the background very nicely. And it's getting rid of it. So all I'm doing is basically cropping around this, but I'm not disturbing the image underneath it. It's masking it. So we'll just mask round there like that. So we've got Mike's lovely little face. Then I need the text. And the text for this is a free font called Nashville. And it's kind of a wanted poster font, obviously, as you can see. Right, so we've got that in. Let's just soften that down a bit. And I think we're good to go with that. Okay. I'm not sure if I've got Nashville installed, but I do have Nashville. So I'm going to go and find Nashville. This is all of the assets that I have for this. So I've got my stamp here and I've got my fonts there. And I do believe Nashville, which is from dafont.com. So if you go to dafont.com, search for Nashville, you will find that font. And I need to put that into the fonts folder. Pro tip, if I type FF, it's going to open the fonts folder. That is an Alfredism. Right, it's added it into there. Oh, no, put that back. No. I need to copy it, don't I? Right, where's Nashville gone? Did it do that? I want to copy it, not move it. So let's copy it into that. There we go. Right, it's all sorted. It's all sorted and it's in there. So if I then go and get the text tool and we go up there, I'm going to need that considerably bigger than that. So let's take it up even bigger than that, I think. Oh, well, we'll see. Right, tell me that Nashville is there. There we go. And wanted. Okay, now that's black at the moment. I could either colour that or maybe I could have a look at some blend modes. Darken won't do much because it's already black to start with. Neither will any of the darker ones. The lighter ones, we don't want it lighter. When we start working here, some of these are absolutely perfect. So we don't want it dark, which is what these ones do. But that either overlay or soft light, you can see there is a subtle difference. I might go for either of those. I think overlay looks a bit better. And then it looks like it's actually printed because you can see through to the background. So blend modes are a very good way to do that. Right, what value shall we place on Mike? What do you think? We'll make it pounds. Wrong font, but we'll sort that out. Oh, actually, maybe it doesn't have that, so maybe we need to just put numbers in. Oh, I'm thinking, does it not have numbers? Crying out loud. Maybe that's why I had a different font. What font shall we use for that then? Let's have a look what we've got.
Kim's got one.
Go on.
Wanted Magic Mike, last seen at Matt Bytes headquarters.
Okay. We will change that back to Nashville. We won't put a price on it. He's priceless anyway, so quite right.
That's
right.
What Peter says.
Exactly. Right. Wanted at Magic Mike. Okay. Magic. Oh, hang on. Oh, what are you doing? Good grief. What are you doing? Right, wanted, Magic Mike. I'm wondering if this is all caps. Nope, it's all the same. Right, Magic Mike. There we go. So I'm going to make that a little bit smaller so it fits on there and put it at the bottom. Because I duplicated it, it automatically took the blend mode with it, which is good news. Right, problem is this in the middle photo, not good. Not good. Because it's the wrong colour, it doesn't blend in with that at all. Now, the other one might not look like it blended in either, which is this one here. So if we turn that off, you can see. If I take that off and we make it normal, it's got the same problem that Mike had. But there was a different blend mode on that, which if you look quickly, you will see is luminosity. So if we get rid of that one and go back to Mike and apply luminosity, oh, it disappears. That's not, oh, hang on, I haven't put the tick on him. There you go. So luminosity retains the light values, but not the colour. So it's gone black and white, and it's taking on the colour below. So that's not bad as far as it goes. I actually think with that, if I change the opacity, it looks like it's printed on rather than stuck over the top. So in this circumstance, that's probably a little bit too dark. So I would take that down like that. And the last thing that I've got to put on there, and I actually had one of these. If we look at the original one, so let's get all of the new one, which is in there in a group of its own. So that's going to be what we did today. Right, but if we turn that off and we turn the other stuff on in here, there was a stamp in there. And that was this little stamp here. And I use this to demonstrate Photoshop, and that's fantastic because Photoshop's got a dissolve blend mode, which is what this is here, all these dots that are missing. So it doesn't look perfect. Affinity Photo does not have a dissolve blend mode, but not to worry, we can deal with that. I've also got a better stamp these days, and I only found this the other day when I was looking, and they're completely free. So I don't think I've actually put the link in. This is the one I'm using, which is that one, which is already pre-distressed, but I can distress it more if I like. I will put the links for these in the details below the video later. But what I did with that was downloaded that. So let's download that and pop it on the shelf, and from the shelf onto there. It's way big at the moment, also way the wrong colour. Now, before you think of recolouring it or anything like that, let's get that. Oh yes, that looks lovely, doesn't it? Think about the blend modes. You could recolour it, but do you actually need to recolour it? You know you can multiply it, but it's not matching. So it's making it darker, but it's not actually matching. These will also make it darker, but it's retaining the colour whilst it's making it darker. Lightning won't help at all. They'll just look ridiculous. And these ones will tend to retain the colour as well. But what did we do with Mike? It was a luminosity. So if we do that, again, it's a little bit dark, but we've lost the red, so it's actually pretty decent. The colour ones, less so, but that luminosity works great. And then what you can do with it is just take it down a bit so it looks like it's actually stamped on it, like that. Now, the other one, the distressing of it, this one is pre-distressed, but if you wanted to distress your own, you've got the wanted stamp there, so let's put that in there. You can, of course, do that. You can do it destructively, or you could do it non-destructively. So if we apply a mask to it, and we then go get the brush tool, and go to the brushes, these will just take chunks of it away. But you do have other brushes in here. Sprays and spatters are pretty decent for things like that, or markers to scribble across it. So if we look at what we've got in here, like what would distress it, something like that. And making sure that you're on the mask, if you look at that brush, you can just see things happening. So if I start to do that, that's quite a big brush, isn't it? Say that bit there that's perfect, just above the N. If I wanted to distress it, I could do that. And it's not destructive. I can bring it all back if I want to. I can actually erase that. So if I think, yeah, I want that bit there distressing more in the middle, so that looks better, but I want that bit back on the N. If you're on your mask mode, you can get the E key, which is the eraser, so just press E and bring that back. I thought, what is that doing? That's actually erasing it. That's not good. I'm trying to erase that from the mask and it's not playing ball. But there you go. So luminosity. What else did we use? Overlay. But there's something not right with that. Something not right. And that is that the background, if we compare the one that I've done today with the group, the background just looks better somehow in the corners, in the edges. That's because I manually put a vignette on it. So in here, at this level here, I put a new layer in. So it was behind everything else, but above the background. And all I did with that was go get a brush. This time I'm going to need a fairly standard basic brush, not an acrylic one, a basic one. I want it quite soft, so this kind of thing here. Probably a bit bigger than that, because I'm just going to go around the edges with it. And I want some kind of... should we get some swatches and choose a nice brown one? There's a brown one in there. Might actually want it a bit deeper than that. So this kind of colour here. So if you're looking at what you're seeing in the top right there, that's the colour that we're going for. So we really want that. And then on our pixel layer, I would like to draw that. So where's my brush? I'm on the erase tool at the moment. Need the brush. There we go. Making sure that that is blend mode normal, but that's not the right brush, is it? So what's it done over here? I wanted that one and I just wanted it bigger. So let's take the hardness down and make the brush bigger. I am having terrible trouble with this. This actually crashed on me yesterday. I think there is some kind of fault in this. It's not making my brush bigger when it should be making my brush bigger. Finally, you're making my brush bigger. Right, you can see the brown here. If I go right the way across that, you can see it's behind everything else. So that's perfect. It's on this pixel layer and it's behind everything else. And all I want to do is take it around the edge like that. So just a slight vignette on the edge. Obviously, at the moment, the blend mode is normal. And when the blend mode is normal, it covers everything. And we don't want it to cover everything. But if you change that blend mode, and this time you want it to darken the background. So we are looking at the darken. Darken doesn't look that natural though. That's the only problem with that. Multiply does, but it's a bit too much, isn't it? But we could multiply and then change the opacity and get the look we're going for. So something like that. And now we've got Magic Mike being wanted. And of course, Magic Mike is always wanted, isn't he? Right, okay. He's disappeared at the moment, but I'll get into the wrap up and then we can go on to questions. So recap of all that we've done. There are blend modes. These are the ones that are in Affinity Photo and all of the Affinity apps as at March 2021. They are in groups. They're in logical groups. The darken group, everything darkens. The lighten group, everything lightens. The contrast adds contrast and so forth. You need a minimum of 2 layers to make it work. At least a base layer at the bottom and a blend layer above that. But you can have more layers involved in the blend. As we saw with the Seattle Skyline, when it punched out everything in every layer below it when we use the erase blend mode. So it's a minimum of 2, but you can take it to whatever degree you need. When we talk about the pixel on the layer above and whatever, we're talking about the matching pixel. So there is a pixel on the base layer and a pixel on the blend layer in the same physical location. If you think like a spreadsheet where you've got A1, B1, B7, it's like that. It's a grid reference to the pixel in the same location on both layers, or however many layers are involved, and it's an interaction between each of those. That is what you see when you apply a blend mode. The core blend modes you will work with are the ones that you've seen me use today. The darken to darken, multiply is your friend, that will always make it darker. Lighten or screen, they will make it lighter, and then overlay and soft light being a softer version of overlay, and that gives you an interaction that gives you contrast and usually works well in many, many situations. Okay, so that was blend modes. This is Mad March. Mad March, we're going live every Sunday at 3 p.m. This blend mode session will be available on demand immediately that we finish. And next week, we're doing create creative tables in Affinity Publisher. So we're going to take it from the top, assuming that you know nothing at all about tables. So we'll look at the core tools within Affinity Publisher to work with tables, but we'll take it further than that and make very much not tables, things like Gantt charts and other creative tables that I'm going to keep as a surprise. Don't forget, it's the same time, wherever you are in the world, as it is this week, because America changed their clocks this morning, which meant an hour extra in bed, which you retain next week. Lose it the week after when we change hours, but for next week, it will be the same time it was this week. The week after that, we're doing Mastering Master Pages in Affinity Publisher, which was also, picked that one because lots of people said, oh, please do that. There's the basic use for master pages, and then there's the magic that you can do with them, with nesting and all kinds of magic codes and things. So that's where we're heading with that. Sadly, we will have changed our clocks and we will have lost an hour's sleep. So it'll be 7 a.m. in Pacific time and 10 a.m. Eastern. And then finally, after that, we've got Adobe Bridge. I know, Adobe, it's free. Free as in totally free. Only need an Adobe account, do not need to pay a penny. And until there is a digital asset manager from Affinity, which would be lovely, wouldn't it? Have said they're interested, you know. Then Bridge is where it's at. So we're doing Bridge. Last week's show is already available on demand. So that was Mastering the Export Persona in Affinity Designer. Did the whole thing. There was nothing left out of that one. So that's available for you to watch. And we're also going live on Friday night with our usual after hours show. 120. How did that happen? Oh, lockdown, that's how that happened. So that's the 19th, that's Friday night. Everything that I do you can find on youtube.com/Elaine Giles. Available on demand. You can also get in touch with me. I've still put Twitter on there, but you know, my blog's probably the best place as a contact form, and that will come straight through to me. Right, we love you guys. If you love us, could you give us a like? Because it really makes a difference with YouTube. YouTube loses their mind every now and then, and weird things happen. Like you look at your stats and for 3 days nobody watched a video, which is not right. So make sure that you're subscribed. And if you want details early of everything that I'm doing, then you need to go to elainegiles.com/VIP. And that is where you can sign up and you will get early notification of everything that I do. You know how I love my PowerPoint? It's gone potty. I've no idea what the next slide is. Because it's not showing me this slide. That's interesting, isn't it? Never mind. I will switch back to the poster and go through the questions. Might even make Mike's mic live again. Because I muted him, didn't I, Mike? Poor Mike. Right. So, I can now see the questions, I think. Have I got the right browser? Mike's put them in for me to have a look at. There we go. There's the right browser. Right. Were there any that I haven't answered? Right, okay, I'm going down to the questions and finding out. Okay. Oh, Debbie pulled a Jonathan. Good grief. Good grief. It's early though, isn't it? It's early. No problem at all. Right, so you want macros. Jonathan said yes to macros, but he's probably nodded off as well. Renee thought he wouldn't need this session, but Elaine has proved me wrong again. Blend modes are sick. Blend modes are really useful, but they're one of those things that you think, oh, I don't know how that works, and you leave it alone. I do remember them coming out 1994 and thinking, oh, would I use that? Oh, how little did I know. I can't imagine now using the app without blend modes. And Affinity are on the ball in terms of adding extra ones when and where they're relevant. What I will say with Affinity, and I wish they wouldn't do this, you go to the help and I thought, right, I need to use the same terminology that Affinity use for blend modes, not Photoshop, because I've done Photoshop for 30 years. So I thought, let's get in my head what the exact syntax is. Use the right words, woman. There was one page on blend modes. Well, I had the help system upside down because I'm thinking this isn't it. There must be more about blend modes. There's one page. It says, you will use the common blend modes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are other blend modes. And then it lists them in a paragraph. And that's it. I thought, but what if you wanted to know what contrast negate actually did rather than guessing? No, there's nothing. Nothing. There's a little bit mentioned in the book, the workbook, but again, it's not a deep dive into blend modes. And you would probably think as an Affinity user, well, I'm certainly not going to buy a book on Photoshop about blend modes. And you'd be right not to do that because the blend modes are different blend modes. I wish that the help system was comprehensive on blend modes, but sadly it's not. Right, so where am I at with these questions? Which one have I answered and which ones haven't I?
Bottom 3 in the question.
Okay, let's get the bottom 3. Don't duplicate the layer to apply the blend mode. Isn't this inconsistent with the earlier demo, the wanted demo? Here I don't duplicate the layer to apply the blend mode. Didn't I? I'll have a check and get back to you on that, Renee. I don't know what I did with that. That file did start life in Photoshop, so maybe there was something weird with that. Right, the source for the, where have we gone? Wanted stamp. Okay, I have got that there. I will get that into the chat right now. There we go. Right, it's in the chat. Okay, you don't need to be muted, Mike, if you want to say hello. So let me unmute you. There we go. Don't be shy.
I'm all shy now. Hello.
Oh, that was masterful, wasn't it? No, that was just in case you needed to vacate or your chair was squeaky or the dog needed dealing with.
Which she did.
Which she did. She decided she'd had enough about 5 minutes from the end. There's only so much you can take with blend modes, and she'd overdone it. Oh, it was a blend mode on the text, so there wasn't a second layer. Oh, naughty me. I'll go back and have a look, see what I was doing it. Oh, you couldn't hear the questions. Okay, I'll make sure that we put the Q&A together. I did that only so I wasn't toggling it on and off. That was why, in case you needed to move, etc. Right, so what have I got here from Peter? Could you apply an effect to emboss the stamp? Yes, you could. Yes, you could. Because you've got 3D options in there. Now, obviously, one of your issues with it is the colour that the thing is. But if you wanted to emboss it, let's get that back and let's cut back to here. Right, we've got the stamp there. No, we've not got the stamp. There's the stamp. Right, there's the stamp. So with that one, we've just got the luminosity applied to it, but you can also apply effects to it. So you've got blur effects, outer shadows, inner shadows, etc. And one of them is 3D. So if you wanted it to kind of look 3D, that's what the default can do. So that looks like it's in wax, in which case you might want it back to red. But you can change the impact of that. So that gives you a 3D. That's very much raised like wax would be. But you've also got the option here to bevel and emboss, which will give you a kind of different look. So the way that is as a default, it looks like it's stamped on it. So instead of it being raised, the edges of that are actually pushed into it as though it's been stamped with something. So again, you might want that to be more of a red colour than merge in with it. I had it that colour because I wanted it to look like it was printed on. But having got it like that, if you go back to it and you change the blend mode back to normal, then that would look like it was stamped on like that. You could then start looking through the other blend modes to see if anything would make it look any better. Now, red's not a good look for that. It's not a good colour to give you a nice impact with this. If the red were darker, that would work nicely. You might get something with the vivid ones, but not really. But if you're happy with the red, like a red stamp, then you could do that. There you go. So that's without taking too long to do it. So yes, you can. You've got two options. They're both in the layer effects. There's 3D and there's bevel and emboss. In here, you do have presets. So that one is called pillow, but you could change that to emboss, which would raise it. You can have an outer one, which only impacts the outside, so it looks like it's sitting above that. So basically, it's got like a light halo around it. Or you can do the inner one, which makes it, that looks like wax, to be honest. That looks like it's sat on top of it. So you can get great effects with just these two options in here. So hopefully that answers that question. Let me know in the chat if that answers that question. Well, I switch back to there and go get the chat, because I was in the questions, not the chat. Where's the chat gone? There's the chat. Okay. Right, well, shall we make Mike live next time then? Should we make you live? You're going to behave yourself and not be coughing and sniffing. Right, we'll make him live, or I'll read the question out, one or the other. There you go. Right, I'm going back up the chat. Was Mike buzzing? No, Mike wasn't buzzing for once. No, it wasn't. Oh, YouTube dropped down to 480. That's appalling. Appalling. Oh, ZYZ. Thank you very much. You're very welcome. You are very, very welcome. Oh, and Paul says thank you as well. You're very welcome. Right, okay. I think I've got all of that lot. Renee's looking forward to tables. Excellent. The tables actually came to me in terms of doing them. People asked about tables, and it was the basics of tables. It was how do you make a table and how do you format it? Because you know what tables are like. You change one thing and then something else changes. But I looked at them and I had a look round with them, and I thought it'd be great if this could do some of what iBooks Author did in 2012. iBooks Author, my baby. Loved iBooks Author. Apple killed it. Obviously, if I loved it, Apple killed it. But iBooks Author, when I did that, I did very different types of tables to show people what tables could actually do, because people said our tables are just boring. You actually saw a table tonight, and I bet you didn't notice it. I will put a slide up. We'll go back into PowerPoint and I will put a slide up and show you that it was a table. And this is what I mean by creative tables. So let's go back into PowerPoint and find the one. So we'll go back where we were and I will find the one with a table on it. That in the lower left-hand corner is a table. And the reason it's a table is it's virtually impossible to have 3 chunks of text in a line, so the YouTube, the colon, and then the address, where everything lines up, where the column on the left is right aligned, the colon in the middle is centre aligned, and then on the right hand side is left aligned. I've tried it. It's a nightmare. So I actually always use a table for that. So it doesn't look like a table, but it is actually a table. I take away all of the formatting on the table so it doesn't look like a table. But again, you know, if you're in Affinity Publisher and you want that kind of effect, you just don't want it showing in a table still might be the right way to do it for something like that. Because otherwise you are fiddling around with tabs trying to line everything up. That way madness lies. It does, trust me. So that's one kind of creative table, but there are many more. And if you have ever, let me know in the chat if you've ever seen one of my iBooks Author sessions from 2012. Do you know who I know has? Jonathan. Jonathan has. Jonathan was there. Then what I did with that was say, iBooks Author made interactive iBooks, so it was very much touch-based. And to me, there was a lot of things you could put in a table that worked brilliantly like that. So that's the kind of stuff that I will be doing. Right, okay then. If there are no more questions, we will head off. So one last call for questions. Put them in the chat if you've got a question. And other than that, we'll be back and see you next week. Renee uses Excel. Well, yes, that's the other option. And Tracy cheated and used numbers. It's not cheating. It's not cheating. It's being inventive. We've all done that. It's like, oh, it's not. I'll do it here and I'll just copy and paste it in and I'll worry about it later. And then you'll come to it and you'll think, how did I do this? Sometimes it works great, but from numbers, it comes in as a vector anyway. You can do a lot of copy and pasting between either PowerPoint and Keynote, and they come in as vectors as well. But let's do it right, hey? Let's do it right, and we'll do it in Affinity Publisher. That way, you won't come back and think, what did I do? What was I thinking? Right, okay then, if there are no more questions, we will bid you good night. If you're with us live, we'll be going live again in less than 2 hours, won't we? So time for a quick drink, I think, and not much else. Right, you are all very welcome. Thanks for coming in thick and fast. You are very, very welcome. And we will see you on Friday if you're joining us for After Hours, and this time next week if you're joining us for Tables. But for the moment, I'm going to say good afternoon from me.
And good afternoon, good morning, good evening from me.
There's always one, isn't there? It's usually my trusty assistant, and we will both see you next time.